Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. Registration is now open for the spring cohort of the Next Economy MBA. Starting March 24th, 2026, this 9-month facilitated learning journey is designed for entrepreneurs, activists, artists, community leaders, and others working on the front lines of the next economy. Drawing on over 15 years of experience supporting more than 500 social enterprises, the program explores the limits of business as usual and introduces practical business principles through a regenerative and equity-centered lens, while building the community and connection needed to stay grounded, inspired, and resilient. If you're curious, join us for a free intro session to meet the facilitators and hear directly from alumni about their experience. You can also save 20% on tuition when you register before February 2nd during our early bird period. So learn more at lifteconomy.com/MBA. That's LIFT economy.com/MBA. Thanks for listening, and now on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
I'm Kevin Bayuk, a partner and worker owner at Lyft Economy. My guests today are Solana Rice and Jeremie Greer from Liberation in a Generation. Liberation in a Generation is an organization dedicated to envisioning an economy where all people of color belong. They work to transform the economy by supporting grassroots leaders, co-building policy, and writing their own story to expose the oppression economy and narrate the liberation economy. Prior to starting Liberation in a Generation, Solana was director of state and local policy at Prosperity Now, where she built strong advocacy partnerships with organizations in the field and advanced dozens of policies in nearly half the states in the nation. Prior to joining Prosperity Now, Solana served as a director for financial security initiatives at PolicyLink. Solana has a master's in city planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she researched the integration of individual development accounts into community development services. She holds a BA in architecture from Washington University in St. Louis. Jeremie began his career in the Columbia Heights and Shaw neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., organizing youth and tenants to fight back against the economic forces rapidly gentrifying that community. Working at the national level in the federal government's premier policy agency, the Government Accountability Office, and at two national nonprofits, the Local Initiative Support Corporation and Prosperity Now, he has become a national policy expert on the causes and the policy solutions to close the racial wealth gap. Jeremie has a bachelor's degree in social work from the University of St. Thomas, a master's in public policy from George Mason University, and an executive education certificate in nonprofit leadership from Harvard University's Kennedy School. I'm so excited to speak with both Solana and Jeremie because their collective work directly aligns with the Next Economy Now podcast's focus on highlighting leaders who are taking a regenerative, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating an economy that truly works for the benefit of all life with no one left out. Solana and Jeremie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
To start the conversation, I'm wondering, could each of you share a little bit about your backgrounds and your journey? How did you get into the work that you're doing today with Liberation in a Generation?
I cannot remember a time when I didn't want things to be better. I can't really remember. As long as I was a little girl, I asked my dad, why do I see this? We would go to downtown Cleveland and we would see people living on the streets, or my family would have trouble keeping a roof over their head. And then the next weekend we'd be driving around in the suburbs of Cleveland looking at brand new housing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just never quite made sense. And after a career focused on how to bring more opportunity, it's a Black and brown people, mostly focused on housing. I thought that architecture part, I thought I was gonna like build housing for people. Nobody told me that's not how it works. Like architects will go out and like build the housing for people. So I thought I was going to do it directly. No. And then I thought, okay, well, let me try to work on like having more folks that have opportunity to own. That was not really where it was at either. I was not going to be a developer. So eventually I just started to ask questions about what is the structure that is created for people. Like it is not individuals that are making these decisions about whether or not they have a roof over their head. It's people that are not living these lives that are really wealthy and do not care about the folks that are unhoused. And I went into the think tank world, and that's where I met Jeremie. How about you, Jeremie? And then we can talk about it.
I came similar to Solana. I think I always knew something was wrong. I grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of hardworking people that struggled. A lot of smart, innovative people. So I know it didn't make sense. But my kind of when it was like, it's the economy stupid kind of like moment was when I was working in Columbia Heights as an organizer. And anyone's been to Columbia Heights, 14th Street is like this huge incline. Like you walk up 14th Street from between like U Street and Park Road. And I walk that every day as an organizer, stopping at churches, buildings, community centers all through the day. That was my job. And I just remember walking up there one day and noticing all of these big dumpsters outside of the houses on the streets that go off of 14th Street. So like Harvard, Euclid, Girard. And I was like, what is that? What is going on? Like, who are all these people? And that was like the first like glimmer that I had of what gentrification was. That's what's like, what's going on? So I wanted to explore it. And as I explored it, it was like, oh, there are people that don't live in this community, that live somewhere else, buying up all these houses and then reselling them. And of course, not reselling them to the people that live there, reselling them to people that were moving into the community. This is post right after 9/11 and, the big growth of government during that time, a lot of people moving into DC. So it was like this moment where it's like, oh, there are these economic forces that are impacting the way that people live their lives in a way so really that was kind of what I wanted to explore. And then like I went into the think tank world and started working and really studying this issue. But again, coming full circle to understanding like the think tank world does a great job of like researching the problem and identifying the problem. I would say the solutions aren't quite where it's at. The solutions should be coming from community. And that's where that organizing background really kicked in for me. So we got to a place where it's like, how can we marry these two things together in a way that really works to really give people in communities, Black and brown people in particular, more power in how they can control their economic lives.
Amazing. So glad that you found each other and started this amazing organization, Liberation in a Generation, whose core vision, as it's stated on the website, kind of envisioning an economy where all people of color belong. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on what this vision entails, what a liberation economy looks like in practice compared to the oppression economy. And I'm sure there's thousands of examples, but if you want to highlight a few things just to help animate the imagination of listeners, like what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I can start on that one. So I think I'm going to start with the oppression economy because it's really the thing we have to anchor ourselves in. And it's acknowledgement that what we live in, the economy that we live in, is a racialized form of capitalism. That the economy that we have is one in where the theft, exclusion, and exploitation of Black and brown people is not a side effect of the economy. It is a core part of the economy that creates wealth for other people. So when we ask questions like, why is there Black unemployment double that of white unemployment? There's an intentional reason why that is, so that people can extract from Black and brown people and build the wealth of other people. And the way in which they do that is through the criminalization of people of color, through not giving people access to the full benefits of the democracy through voter suppression and things like that, creating dual financial systems. So there's one financial system that really works for people that can generate and build wealth, and there's another financial system that is actually designed to extract wealth from Black and brown people. And then the existence of all the isms, racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those things are in place to other people so that there's a justification for not including them in economic systems. So the oppression economy is a way to acknowledge that we are living in an economy that is intentionally oppressing Black and brown people so that others can gain and build wealth. And that's a big starting point because all our careers, we've kind of just accepted that this form of capitalism is just what it's going to be. And we've never, in a way, we don't challenge the orthodoxy of what is intended to do. Like I said, racism is seen as kind of a side effect of capitalism. It was treated as an externality, like, oh, this is just a thing that happens and we have to kind of mitigate from it. But acknowledging that it's part of it and the purpose and the point of it actually gets to a place where we can start thinking and get to a place where we need to envision something different and something new. What I'll say about the liberation economy, and Solana, you weigh in where I missed, is the challenge of the liberation economy is that we've never really lived in one in this country as it is formed today. Now, were people living a liberation economy before Europeans showed up? Very likely. But as we understand this country today, we have never lived in one. We've always lived in one in which racism has been used to extract from Black and brown people for the benefit of others. So what we're really doing, the first step in a liberation economy is envisioning what would that economy look like? How would it be similar to what we have today? How would it be different than what we have today? And what we really root in at Liberation Generation is that this isn't an intellectual exercise. This is an exercise that should be happening with people in community so that they are envisioning what that community can be, and that that activity is one of the things that is going to help build the power to make that thing a reality. And there's a lot of conversations happening around it, but how do we bring that all together in a power building context and one that centers Black and brown people as the beneficiaries of that economy?
Yeah. So we've started with a set of ideals or principles as a starting place so that when we're working with and partnering with organizations, it's not blank slate. It's not like, what do you want? What should we do? But we have a set of things that we think if we start to see these stars aligning, then maybe we're getting towards a liberation economy. And it's very basic. It's where all people of color, all Black and brown people have our basic needs met, where we are finding safety and security, and not in a police state, that we are finding safety and security outside of that, outside of the criminalization that Jeremie was mentioning before, and have basic housing like what we were talking about earlier, that we are really valued for and compensated for the care that we are providing in our communities and what we're contributing to our communities. So really expanding the notion of what especially Black people are for in the economy, for the entirety of this economy. Black people, we have been labor, we have been bodies, we have been subjects, objects, and not drivers and not deciders. Yeah. So, and that goes back to imagination, which we'll chat about soon. But essentially, we'd also see a star in that constellation where we belong, where people of color are integral, where we have full economic citizenship, where we have not only access, but decision-making power and governing power in our economy. And our economy is just basically how we interact with one another. It's actually, for us at LibGen, it's everything. Like, there aren't really things that the economy doesn't touch.
Yeah, we say all the time, like, that's part of the economy. Whatever people, and that's how we engage people. Like, what are you working on? They'll tell us what we're working on. Here's the economic connection to that thing you're working on. And people are like, oh, okay, yep, I see it. And then they're ready to roll in a new way.
Real facts. So, in your approach, one aspect of the approach talks about supporting grassroots leaders and co building policy. And I think there's probably some people maybe listening who are like, policy, and they kind of get an allergy and they kind of freak
Yeah,
out. But it's this really critical piece that relatively few, comparatively few people are holding and inquiring about and developing. And so, co building policy to advance change. I'm wondering if you could share, if it's okay to share some examples of either who and how you're partnering with organizations led by and serving people of color, and or how these collaborations can lead to policy changes at whatever level, local, state, national. Just curious, the examples, I'm sure people get excited here. Like when we say policy, before I put podcast down, I want to know like what's going on. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I know policy is such a daunting word, and we all know what, like, we live with policy day in and day out. We set policies in our own households, right? I don't let my kid just jump on my couch all the time. Like, it's just a set of rules. And I think part of the reason why it's daunting is because there's an industry that makes it daunting, because we have a set of elite institutions that have said we are the ones that know how to make policy, and we are the ones that are going to be the stewards of this nation's resources or of your community's resources. We have the acumen, we have the titles, we have education, and I'm sure Jeremy can totally speak to this, is like, we have learned that people of color, especially people of color, know exactly what they need. We are very imaginative about how we obtain resources and are also often thinking about the future. Like, often. We have to. We have to. Actually, one of your previous guests, Robin D.G. Kelly, said the only way to ensure survival for Black people was to envision a radically different future. Like, we don't have a choice but to envision a radically different future. So when we talk about policy, of course, we're talking about the laws that govern our nation, our states, our counties, our cities, our neighborhoods. And those policies are in place and undergirded by a set of beliefs, values, and cultural practices. And the beliefs and values that we have currently are mired with all the isms that Jeremie just talked about. So even when we go to a place that is mostly Black and brown people and we say, should everyone have guaranteed income? And mostly people say yes. And then they say, except the people who are lazy and don't do anything, or if they're going to waste that money, if they're going to buy cell phones and tennis shoes. And that's just another ism. It's not actually, it doesn't need, someone, I can't remember who said this, but, white supremacy won't need white people forever. Like, it sits within all of us. Yeah. So that's part of the work that we have to do to build policy, because we can write stuff on paper and be like, this is a great policy. Guaranteed income is a great policy. But if we haven't addressed some of those isms that undergird it, we're going to come up against some really difficult and challenging work, because even the people who are for it won't totally be for it. So that's some of the leaf work. And then the approach work is that we have to have practices that allow us to actually envision and literally practice, like it's a praxis of governing, of deciding. So first, and we don't have a lot of Black people, I have not had a lot of experience in having settings where I just get to imagine, and also where I get to decide, right? And so that's part of our approach, is like that we're both trying to we're laying in front of people a set of policies that are just ideas. We're interrogating why these ideas confront our typical understanding of how an economy should work. Like, you have to work till your fingers are down to the bone Why do we believe that? What are the beliefs and values? And then if we don't believe that, if we're able to set that aside and say, well, maybe everyone should be able to benefit from the resources and the abundance of this nation, then we also have to believe that we can decide, that we actually have agency to decide how to distribute our resources. And then if we really believe that we are able to decide, then we have to have real practices around, okay, I have to be able to imagine what that would look like. And as a decision maker, I have to really act. So there's a whole bunch of layers before we even get to a really great sustainable policy idea. And yeah, we're so excited to start exploring what that looks like in the context of, and I'll give an example of social housing here in California. So there was legislation a couple of years ago that passed that gives a definition of social housing. And social housing is basically a housing guarantee. It's housing that is off the market, it is decommodified, it is held in the public interest, either by public agency or a community-led organization or a community entity or regional entity. It is governed by the residents. Tenants are protected, and the land stays in the public hands for perpetuity. And so this sounds like a wild notion, like just a wild notion. Although we've done it before in this country, we still do it. We've had versions of it. And we provide this for our military, actually. We do this for our military and more. That's a whole other podcast. So what we've been starting to do is engage residents in trying to understand what social housing would look like from their perspective and how these definitions of social housing would actually work. What would it mean if everyone could afford to live in housing? What would it look like? What would residents need to make that viable? And just in doing that simple exercise of having a space where we're asking folks to step into a future. So we set a space where it's 2035 and social housing actually exists. And we're inviting people through the door and we're having them sit over a meal and we're asking them to set 2025 aside. 2025 is gone. We're in 2035 and we're walking folks through a scenario, a story about a person who lives in social housing and her travails in trying to find a unit that accommodates her mother and is good, has good schools and is close to her work. And we have physical artifacts that we hand people that we say, this is what in this story, it's what Maria is opening. This is a piece of mail that has come to her door. And when I tell you, when people are holding this artifact and they're shaking because nothing good ever comes in the mail, is what folks tell us. Yeah, nothing good ever comes in the mail.
Right.
So now we're starting to get to what I said earlier, which is some of those beliefs and some of those values that were surfacing in the conversation about policy in an imaginary world. So we're braiding together these three really core pieces. And we're telling folks like, okay, you're in this imaginary place, but now we've recorded what you think and how you think this should be governed. We're going to take this and we're actually going to make recommendations, like policy recommendations off of it. And we're going to share it back to you. So we've done this sort of 3-layered experience, and it's our responsibility to stay in good relationship with the folks that are participating, with the organizers who have brought them together and who are going to hold the campaign going forward, right? They're going to continue even after this study, even after these engagements, they're holding the relationship in community, they're holding the idea of social housing, they're holding the campaign strategies. And so that's how we're both like shifting the way we're thinking about not only what policy is, but who gets to decide and who gets to imagine.
That's very rich. Maybe I can reflect a little bit. That came up for me, and then I want to hear from Jeremy for sure to elaborate. You know, I noticed when we're, again, some people have this reaction to policy. You didn't go into right off the bat of like this regulation or this subsidy at the state level or whatever. Like kind of like you said, the ideas are there. And Jeremy mentioned the best ideas and solutions actually come from community. But I love that policy is only possible. The field of possibility comes from those values and beliefs and dreams, and then the praxis of actually envisioning and then making decisions together and dialogue and deliberation and all that skill building, which is so many people have been excluded from for so long. And from there, Jeremy said earlier, it's really about this movement and power building. And so if you can build up from the praxis and then the beliefs and values, the ideas are going to probably be natural. And then there's this holding and there's this building here. And then from there, like, oh yeah, the state can offer subsidy for social housing, or there could be a regulation that says you can't have non-local community-based organizations to be able to buy housing. It has to be or planning. There's all sorts of policies, I'm sure, when it comes down to the letter and the paper and how it gets implemented. But it's kind of like not about that. I mean, it is about that, but it's about the other pieces. I really appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we want to do is, so I see visioning as a way of wielding power. It is one of the ways that we can wield power, is to envision a future different than the one we have today. That is actually a way, an activity we can take to wield power. And under our current kind of systems and the way it is supposed to be done, I'm using air quotes for those listening, is it's the way that you do policy and the way that you envision a different future is you do it in boardrooms in Washington, D.C., using research papers as the only input. And then you go to your elected officials, and you take your research papers and you take your ideas and you try to convince them that this is the way. And then another group has a different vision and they do the same thing. And that's it. But that way of doing it doesn't take into account the people that are going to be impacted. So it's almost as if we're doing this for people, or we're doing this to people even. And what we're saying is that we can get in a different setting that is not a Washington boardroom. We can go through a process using different inputs, or additive inputs on top of the research, but those inputs being people's lived experiences and the values that they have. Let's treat that on par with the inputs that come from researchers. Let's treat them the same. There's no hierarchy of input. It's all good input, and we all consider it in how we deal with policy. Because what that does is it gives people that power back. People can claim that power back to envision a different place, that my lived experience is an input that can build this policy in a way on par with that research report done by whatever university. And again, the reason why we think that's so important, because if we're going to sustain this democracy, then the way in which you make that reality happen is through the power of the people that have come up with those solutions, and that they're joining together. And that is the only way we believe the Black and Brown people are going to be able to push a solution like that into being, because racism has kept the other means away from Black and Brown people. You can't buy a politician. There's not enough money in the Black and Brown community to purchase a politician, to give to, millions and millions, now billions of dollars to campaigns. That isn't an avenue for Black and Brown people. So we have to use an avenue that is through the democratic process, through the building local and political power, and that the act of visioning the future is another way of wielding that power.
Aiming and wielding that power. Yeah. I'm tempted to ask a question that scares me a little bit, unscripted, but it just came up for me in hearing what you were just saying, Jeremy, is like, the reason I'm scared is because when I get caught in my most cynical moments, I look at the apparatus of governance as it exists today in this country in
Yeah.
particular at all levels. And, some people would say influenced by, I think I'd probably say we agree, captured by economic interest. White supremacist capitalism has captured
Hmm.
the means of regulation and subsidy towards
Hmm.
the ends of wealth accumulation by those who are already privileged and benefiting from the exclusion of others and the oppression of others. And so what's the threshold? How do we build enough power? Do you see why I'm scared about it?
Yeah.
Like I get cynical. Like, how do we have to dismantle? Obviously, it has to be dismantled. This capture of representational democracy, it has to be dismantled. And I want to believe there's a means to power. And I sense what you're saying is like, we can do this. It's actually starting with the values and beliefs and organizing and collecting that power. Like that's a prerequisite, but I get scared, like, because like, is there enough?
Yeah.
How do we do that in a generation? That gives me, I get hopeful again, but
We got
I'm
time.
curious. So I know this is unscripted off of anything we said we talk about, but I'm curious for your reaction when it's so captured. I get scared. I'm wondering how you talk me down, please. Make me.
No, I love that you've taken it off script because this is the question you're asking is a fundamental question that we're always is at the core of our struggle at Liberation Generation. How I'll respond to that is it is very easy to be cynical and frustrated if we are confining ourselves to the same tactics that have been really failing us over the last, I'll say, 50 years. That we are using the means of those who have wealth power to try to change the conditions for people that don't have wealth power. And if we continue to do that, I think we're going to continue to lose and we're going to continue to be unhappy with the result. And we're going to continue to be as frustrated as you just expressed, Kevin. And I think that the task before us, and while yes, we have a generation to get to the destination, but I think that we have to start today is we have to create and develop new approaches and strategies to get to where we want to go, to get to the horizon that we want to end up at, and that we can't continue to rely on the old tactics and the old ways, and actually are tactics and ways that are for those who have wealth. And what Solana described in our policy design approach is our attempt at trying to test a new strategy and a new tactic to build the type of power that we need. Now, there's a lot we can learn from in the past. We often talk about the way the civil rights movement structured itself in having seismic change at the time. And again, using tactics that hadn't been tried and true, like they were experimenting. And that's, I think, where we have to get back to the experimentation of new approaches, new tactics, new practices, new ways of being in this work in order to expect different results.
I also take hope in time that we have a generation, that there's still some urgency. I take hope in new tactics, definitely. I also take hope in the fact that we are not talking about small shifts. I would be really, really sad if we were still talking about making changes to SNAP or, public benefits, or like if we were just tinkering around the edges. I'm taking hope because when we talk about what could be the most boring thing ever, taxes, like the tax code, and we talk with folks in their communities and we talk about corporate power and corporate capture, folks know exactly what we're talking about. They know exactly what we're talking about. So we don't have to tinker. So we've got time, we've got new tactics, and we don't have to tinker. We're good. Like, we're not trying to play that game that Jeremie said. I was just thinking, I was listening to the audiobook of James, which is really good. I highly recommend it. It's a long listen, but it's really good. And the main character, James, is trying to go back and buy his family. We can't, like, as Black people, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. So talking about a new tactic, we're not going to buy our way, just like Jeremie said, we're not going to buy our way into a democracy. We're not going to buy our way into a new economy. There are structures that are not working for us. Do we need to dismantle them? Yes. And are they being dismantled as we speak? Yes.
Yeah.
And so therefore the urgency around imagination is quite real. It's quite real.
Yeah.
Because what are we supposing to replace it with?
One thing that I'm finding opportunity in what's happening now is, yes, there's going to be a lot of pain. There is a lot of pain and going to continue to be a lot of pain over the fall of critical institutions that we have relied on for a long time. And we're seeing that happen before our eyes and feeling very powerless to stop it. And the other side of that, is when these things fall, it creates an opportunity to build anew.
Mm-hmm.
So when we come on the other side of this, there are going to be things that we are going to say, you know what, we didn't really like the way that worked.
Right.
Now we have the opportunity to create something completely different. We talk about housing a lot. I spent my career working in housing, just complaining about the way it's structured, the way that the resources go out to communities, the type of housing it builds, and all of that.
Yeah.
If HUD were to be dismantled, I'm not taking it apart. We're not taking it apart. They're taking it apart. If they were to take it apart, there's still going to be a need for affordable housing in this country.
Right.
What are we going to do to build something in its place? That to me is the opportunity that is underneath all. It's hard to see because there's so much pain happening right now. It's hard to see, but there is that opportunity with us that is going to be there when the dust settles and everything kind of after everything falls.
I love that it's not just this tinkering and incremental. It's this more radical transformative potentiality, and some of the enabling conditions is actually the odious self-dismantling, self-destruction of the white supremacist power structure that is. Can you say a little bit more, just to share more? Because I find a lot of extraordinarily beautiful vision on the website that says liberation guarantees. You mentioned social housing. I'm wondering, just for the listeners who are like, well, what else is in a liberation economy? Just even some of the spaces or highlights or some of the things that really animate communities to be like, okay, now this is not tinkering. It won't be surprising to people, I'm sure, but it's really critical stuff. So I'm wondering if you could share some of the other pieces of the guarantees.
Totally. Folks often ask us like, how did you come to these guarantees? And we're like, they've been around. These are ideas that have been around for a long,
we didn't
long
invent
time.
These guarantees.
We didn't make these up. We decided to put them together, but they aren't new. And a previous guest on your pod, Natalie Foster, and I are good friends as well. And we've talked a lot about these. We call them liberation guarantees. A guarantee to income. So very aligned with the guaranteed income, basic income worlds, and lots of folks seeing lots of pilots all across the nation in their cities and counties. Guaranteed to housing. So we just talked about social housing and what that looks like. This is not your grandma's public housing. It would need to be different. And a guaranteed to healthcare. We've had that conversation for a long time as well in this nation. Guaranteed to a job. So Jeremie opened with the fact that we have such a big racial divide in our unemployment rates. And it's actually by design. The forces that be, the Federal Reserve, et cetera, don't have a mandate to have full employment for everyone. Success for the federal government is not that everyone has a job, actually. And so usually that means Black and brown people are more likely to be out of a job. Yet we have so many things that we need to do in this nation. We have like so many things to clean. We have like the land to clean. We have care needs. We have a whole like transition to a green economy that we need to do. Like we have a lot of things we need to do. So a guarantee to jobs. A guarantee to inheritance, which goes to this fact that, one of the things that's driving the racial wealth gap is inheritance itself, but also that a lot of the inequities that are built in across the whole economy are baked in to and are connected to inheritance. And so that includes both a conversation about reparations and a conversation about how do we ensure that every child in this country has a fresh start with a program known as baby bonds, which we can talk. There's a new program happening in California just in January. I think the last one is a guarantee to family care. And that's the idea that Caring Across Generations, a wonderful organization, has been working to advance and has piloted in states to ensure that everyone has access to the resources needed to care for their family, their elders, and their kiddos. And it's almost like an insurance that if you need it, you can draw down on it, much like unemployment insurance. Jeremie, did I get them all? Did I get all seven?
Yeah, you got them all. I think that the underlying kind of premise behind it all, under it is our responsibility to us as a collective that we believe that there is a responsibility for us as a society, as a community, to care for one another. And the mechanism in which we do that is often through the government. Now, could we live in a like pure communist world in the future that is like there's no need for government and that care just happens? Sure, maybe that is the future that we all are moving towards. But where we are today is that there has to be some mechanism that holds responsibility for doing that. And where we sit today and why we structured and talked with people about the guarantees in this way is that it is something that the government is responsible for doing. And that the care that it provides through other systems, like, everyone has access to an education. It isn't a quality and equal education. We're not going to argue that, but everyone has access to it. And that is a government guarantee. And we're saying that there's a set of economic things that should be guaranteed to people. And the reason why we think guarantees are so important is because large scale economic policy in the past has excluded Black and Brown people unless it is structured as a guarantee. The New Deal policies found ways to cut Black and Brown people out. Farm workers couldn't participate in Social Security. GIs came and couldn't access the GI Bill. So if it's structured as a guarantee, everyone should be given access to the guarantee. And that's why we talk about it in that way.
Very insightful and thoughtful. And even if it's old and wise ideas, packaging them and then structuring them as guarantees, there's a wisdom there that helps animate the imagination for a possibility, that visioning piece. What are you most excited about now in your work or in the broader movement? I know this are challenging, trying times. We've been living in trying times maybe for our entire lives. Now it seems very poignantly trying. Just curious if there's something that's grabbing that you feel excited about. And I imagine there's a lot in your work that's exciting, but if you wanted to pick one or two things to share with listeners, I'd be curious.
I'll share one, and I know Solana's got a lot of them because Solana's she's the more optimistic of the two of us. But one thing that excites me a lot is I spent my career working in think tank world, people saying, well, you can't talk to people about this because they won't understand it or they won't think it's important. Whether it's tax policy, whether it's corporate law, whether it's pick your issue, and people will say that. And they say it because I believe they actually just don't want to talk to people about it. They just want to talk in their intellectual circles about it. They don't want to go. And actually, because what that does is it forces you to answer questions that you otherwise wouldn't have to answer in those settings.
Right.
And what we've done is we've tested that. And I'll say people want to talk about this stuff. So we are currently having conversations with organizers around tax policy, federal, state, and local tax policy. And people want to get into the weeds of tax policy. They want to learn more. They want to understand it more. They want to understand, how does this impact this thing over here that we cared about? I'll tell you, we're working with one of the groups that we work with is called Bar Business, and they work with formerly incarcerated women in Georgia. And the leaders there are so excited about talking about, because tax policy impacts returning citizens so much. They're coming out with added taxes that you and I don't have to pay because of their experience in the carceral system. So people are excited and want to dig into these things. So we believe that there is not an economic issue that is out of bounds to talk about with folks and with organizers and people in community. And what we found is that people are ready to meet you and have those conversations. The responsibility, though, is on us to make the connection. Why should this matter to you? That's the gateway and the entry in. And once you get there, people are excited to talk. So that's what gives me a lot of hope and excitement.
It's a great one.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this methodology of sitting in an imagination, and I'm starting to think about it as future casting. And in doing so, I'm just researching and thinking about and trying to understand what other people have done around imagination. And I came across a quote that said, "Without darkness, we are not just incomplete, we fail to dream," by Bear Guerra. And it's a dark time, and we need it. We need it because we have to dream. It's now time to dream. And some of the things that really inspire me is when I'm in especially intergenerational spaces where elders are able to transfer some of their like twinkles of dreams to younger folks. The guarantee that I forgot to mention was debt-free college. And it is one of the spaces where we have been able to bring young people that would benefit from something like debt-free college. Imagine being able to go to college, not just lowering the tuition, but not having to carry all of the housing costs and the book costs, and it just becomes untenable. We convened a couple of groups around debt-free college. We created artifacts that said, "Welcome to Baldwin University." And we gave folks an acceptance letter, and it had James Baldwin's face on it. And it has a Pell Grant card that covers all your costs, childcare, if you need housing. And there were several young people that said, "Wait, I have to pay? I need this? Why do I have to pay? I have to take out loans? I'm going to have to take out loans to go to college?" Right? And the older folks in the room were also explaining, "Yeah, I took out loans. This is the way it is, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be." And so then we are opening up a space to dream something else. So we're saying, should we be able to take care of childcare? How would we pay for this as a nation? We're asking these really big, hard questions in a space that is typically not made for this kind of interaction, conversation, relationship building. So I'm just so really electrified by the moments that we get to have these kinds of conversations that I'm hoping will build lasting relationships.
Beautiful example of something that's exciting. I love this intergenerational transfer of dreams and the glimmers and the animation, and that you have excitement around that excites me. I'm curious, I'm mindful of the time that I've requested from you both. So curious if there's anything that LibGen needs right now to further your work, and if listeners of Next Economy Now could help in any way to contribute to the growth and development of your mission and what you're doing. And also for those who are inspired by what you're up to, is there ways that they can learn more, and what are the best ways for them to, follow or engage or support?
I'm going to give a couple of examples. One is to visit liberationinageneration.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We send it out fairly frequently, no spam, but we have much more content both on the website, and the newsletter gives updates about where we're at and these conversations that we're having. Of course, there's a donation page on there as well if folks want to support a liberation economy. And I think the last thing is an ask of the next time you think something's not possible, a liberation economy is not possible, just ask yourself why and write it down and be like, why do I think that? And revisit it in a week and see if something might be different. Or if you've noticed in your walkabout that maybe the assumptions that you had are being challenged. Maybe you're seeing also glimmers of hope. So yeah, those are the things. Jeremie, anything else? Did I forget anything?
Yeah, I think that's right. The only thing I'd add, which is support your local organizers. That is our pathway to changing this. And actually, if we are going to stop the wave of things that are happening, it is going to happen in those places. The halls of power have been captured, but they can't capture our communities because it is where we live. It is where our people are, is where our friends are. So I'd say support your local organizers because they're ones that are going to pull us out of this and bring us to a new place.
Agreed.
Facts. Thank you both for time today on Next Economy Now. Thank you for your vitally, critically important work, the way you approach partnership, the way you're thoughtful in a transformative context, not tinkering at the edges, radical possibilities, engaging, envisioning, and praxis. Everything that you're doing is, I think, deeply sympathetic to what we're putting our life energy into at Lyft Economy and the Next Economy Now. And any way that we can support, we will try and do so. And just the courage to make the choices you've made. I don't know if it's true, but maybe some people get lost in think tank land and never actually bridge out. But you've made courageous choices to, get out and partner and do that development. I'm just deeply grateful for the energy that you're bringing to this vitally important work. So thank you both. And I hope to be in relationship with LibGen and see if we can help out in any way and be in contact.
Great.
Well, thanks for having us.
Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for all that you're doing with Next Economy Now.
Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation and are looking to dive even deeper into the B Corp movement, you'll love our new podcast, Beyond the B, hosted by Lyft Economy's Amy Allison and me, Ryan Honeyman. Beyond the B is your insider's guide to the B Corp movement. You'll learn about the new B Corp standards shaping our community, how the B Corp movement is navigating the various tensions and challenges of growth, and how businesses like Patagonia are putting their commitments to people and planet in practice. Check out our latest episodes and free resources at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can also subscribe to Beyond the B on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.